My girlfriend spent 3 weeks mocking me. It took me only 3 minutes to end it. So there I was, watching the most heartbreaking scene from K-pop Demon Hunters, when my girlfriend Molly walked into my room. She stared at me with a shocked expression while I quickly wiped away my tears. "Are you seriously crying over a cartoon right now?" she said, in a judgy tone that cut through the room. I tried explaining it wasn't just a cartoon. The show had incredible fight choreography, and the storyline about demon hunters protecting Seoul was actually really compelling. She burst into laughter. "It's literally made for 12-year-old girls," she said. "What's next? You gonna start collecting their merchandise too?" I told her lots of people my age watched anime and animated shows, but she just rolled her eyes at me. "Sure, but this is about K-pop magical girls. It's next level embarrassing." Over the next few days, Molly kept bringing it up. Every time we hung out with friends, she'd mention how I watched girly cartoons. When I tried defending myself, she'd say I was being too sensitive and couldn't take a joke, but it didn't feel like joking anymore. It felt like she was trying to make me ashamed of something I enjoyed. I could only hope she'd stop soon. She didn't. The teasing only worsened the more popular the show got. Molly started constantly playing the song Golden whenever I came over, singing along in this mocking baby voice, butchering the lyrics intentionally. And when we went out, she'd point to every Asian person on the street and ask if I wanted to talk about the silly cartoon with them. "I bet they'll even sing the Korean parts of the songs with you," she giggled. One afternoon, I woke up from a nap to my phone exploding with notifications. I grabbed it and opened my group chat. Everyone was losing it over a photo. When I finally found it, my stomach dropped. Molly had photoshopped me into an image hugging Rumi with hearts around us. The caption said, "Caught him red-handed." She'd sent it to everyone we knew. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the responses. Most were just laughing emojis, but some friends seemed genuinely uncomfortable that my girlfriend was publicly humiliating me like this. I marched over to the living room where my girlfriend was typing away at her phone, sending the picture out to family members too. That's when I lost my cool. "Why? Why would you do something like this to me?" I asked. She raised an eyebrow and rolled her eyes at me. "Seriously? It's funny. Everyone thinks it's hilarious." Except I wasn't laughing. "Delete it," I demanded. "Look, it's literally your fault for liking a show for little girls in the first place. Besides, this was a joke, not a deck. Don't take it so hard," she said condescendingly and went back to giggling at her phone screen. A week later, Molly found a website that made fake marriage certificates. She printed out a marriage certificate with my name and Rumi and posted it to her Instagram story with the caption, "He's cheating on me?" Then she tagged me in it, then tagged everyone. That's when I had it. I was done. That night when Molly went on Instagram to make fun of me, I was ready. I heard her start the live stream, at first talking to viewers about her day. Then she brought me up. "My boyfriend's probably watching his little cartoon right now," she said, laughing and reading out all the mocking comments loudly. She called me into the room, holding her phone up so the camera caught both of us. "Hey, everyone wants to know what your wedding with Rumi was like." I looked at the screen and saw the chat spamming with comments like, "kitty movie lover," and something in me just snapped. All the embarrassment disappeared. "You know what?" I said, looking directly at the camera. "So what if I like cartoons and animations? So what if I enjoy something that's considered for girls? Since when did having interests outside someone's narrow definition of masculine become something to mock?" The chat started slowing down. I kept going. "I'm not hurting anyone. I'm not doing anything wrong. I just like a show with good storytelling and amazing animation. And honestly, the fact that you've spent 3 weeks making that into a personality flaw says way more about you than it does about me." And suddenly the comments shifted. People began calling Molly mean. Some brought up that their own boyfriends and parents watched the show. Other men in the comments agreed that the battle animations and songs were fire. Some of our friends in the chat called Molly insecure. She tried laughing it off, but I could see her eyes shifting nervously as she scanned the chat. "Everyone needs to chill. It's not that deep," she said, but people weren't backing down. They called her weird for making this into such a big deal. And just when things were really getting out of hand, I looked her in the eyes and said in front of everyone, "We're done, Molly." Then I walked out, leaving her screaming. I left our apartment to stay with a friend while things between us got sorted out. Molly ended up deactivating her Instagram in the morning. Apparently the comments didn't stop after the stream ended. People kept posting about how uncomfortable they'd been watching her mock me publicly for weeks. And all the friends who stood by and laughed along started reaching out to apologize, admitting they were afraid to defend me. When I asked why, they started acting weird. "Don't you know? Molly's done this before to Timmy." I froze. "Timmy? Who's that?" Full story on channel linked below. I got to Jong's apartment around 9 that night. He opened the door before I even knocked, probably heard my footsteps in the hallway. He grabbed my bag and tossed it in the corner of his living room without saying anything. I collapsed onto his couch and stared at the ceiling while he pulled out his phone. 10 minutes later, he told me pizza was on the way. We ended up watching some random show on Netflix, one of those cooking competitions where people make fancy desserts. Neither of us really paid attention. I kept replaying the live stream in my head, seeing Molly's face when the comments turned against her, hearing my own voice saying we were done. Part of me felt relieved. Part of me felt like I'd just jumped off a cliff without checking if there was water below. Jong didn't ask questions or try to make me talk about it. He just sat there eating pizza and occasionally laughing at something on screen. My phone started buzzing around 10:30. I pulled it out and saw the group chat exploding with messages. People who watched the stream were sending supportive stuff, telling me I did the right thing, but some were asking for details about what happened after I left, wanting to know if Molly said anything else, basically looking for more drama to discuss. I scrolled through maybe 20 messages before I realized I didn't want to deal with any of it. I held down the power button and turned my phone completely off. The sudden silence felt strange but also necessary. I needed a break from everyone having opinions about my relationship falling apart on camera. I woke up the next morning to sunlight coming through Jong's living room window. My neck hurt from sleeping on the couch at a weird angle. I turned my phone back on and watched the screen light up with notification after notification. 17 texts from Molly. I opened them and started reading. The first few were angry, calling me an asshole for embarrassing her in front of everyone. Then they shifted to apologies, saying she never meant to hurt me and didn't realize I was so sensitive about the cartoon thing. Then back to angry, accusing me of planning the whole confrontation to make her look bad. Then apologetic again, begging me to call her so we could talk. I screenshotted every single message before doing anything else. After what happened with the photoshopped images, I wanted documentation of her behavior. Then I blocked her number. My hands shook a little as I did it, but it felt like the right move. Jong was making eggs and toast when I walked into the kitchen. He asked if I slept okay, and I shrugged. Then he mentioned something that caught me off guard. Hunter had apparently texted him last night saying she wanted to talk to me, that she'd been wanting to say something about Molly's behavior for weeks, but felt stuck. I was surprised because Hunter had laughed along with some of the jokes at my expense. Jong said she felt really uncomfortable the whole time, but didn't know how to speak up. He flipped the eggs onto plates and handed me one. I ate without really tasting anything, thinking about how many people apparently noticed things were wrong but stayed quiet. I had an afternoon class at 1:30, so I headed to campus around 1. The moment I walked into the building, I noticed people staring. Not obvious staring, but that thing where someone glances at you and then quickly looks away when you make eye contact. A group of girls near the vending machines stopped talking when I passed them. Some guy I barely knew from my statistics class gave me a thumbs up in the hallway. I nodded back, but it felt weird. Validating maybe, but also strange to have my personal life become public knowledge. I slid into my seat in the back of the classroom and pulled out my notebook, trying to focus on the lecture about supply and demand curves. Hunter caught up with me outside the building after class ended. She touched my arm and asked if we could talk for a minute. We sat on one of the benches near the main quad. She apologized for not speaking up sooner, said she thought it was just teasing at first. But then she saw my face during the live stream and realized how cruel it had actually gotten. She explained that she felt terrible for laughing along sometimes, that she knew it was wrong but convinced herself it wasn't her place to get involved. I appreciated her being honest about it. She seemed genuinely sorry. Hunter told me she wasn't the only one who felt that way. Several people in our friend group were increasingly uncomfortable, but didn't know how to intervene. They talked about it privately among themselves, but nobody wanted to cause drama or make things awkward. I told her I appreciated the apology, but also felt frustrated that it took a public confrontation for anyone to say anything. She nodded and said she understood why I felt that way. We sat there for a few more minutes talking about how the whole situation unfolded. Then she mentioned Molly had been texting people in the group, trying to get them to take her side. Most people were ignoring her or giving short responses because they genuinely thought she was out of line. I walked back to Jong's apartment around 4. When I opened the door, I found Corbin sitting on the couch talking to Jong. I recognized him from his profile picture in the live stream chat. He was the guy who first called Molly out for being mean. He stood up and shook my hand, said he drove over from his place across town because he wanted to make sure I was okay and offer support in person. I was surprised, but also grateful. We all sat down and Corbin started telling me about his own experience. He had an ex who did similar things, making fun of his interests in front of others and dismissing his feelings when he objected. She told him he was too sensitive and couldn't take a joke, just like Molly said to me. Hearing someone else describe almost the exact same pattern made me feel less alone in what happened. The three of us ended up talking for hours. Corbin explained how his ex would find something he cared about and slowly turn it into ammunition. First small jokes, then bigger ones, then full public mockery. Jong shared that he'd seen some of this with Molly too, but didn't realize how bad it was until the live stream. We discussed how easy it is to normalize bad behavior when it escalates gradually. One joke doesn't seem like a big deal, then two jokes, then a photoshopped image, then a fake marriage certificate. By the time you realize what's happening, you're already deep in a pattern of being disrespected. It was the first real conversation I'd had about the situation beyond just replaying what happened in my head. Corbin said something that stuck with me. He told me that breaking up on camera might have felt messy, but at least I stood up for myself when it mattered. A lot of people stay quiet and let the mockery continue because they're afraid of conflict. 2 days later, I needed to get more clothes from the apartment and face the reality of living with Molly until one of us moved out. Jong offered to come with me for support, but I told him I had to do this alone. The walk over felt longer than usual, even though it was only 3 blocks. I kept rehearsing what I'd say about the lease and living arrangements, trying to stay calm and practical. When I unlocked the door and stepped inside, Molly was sitting on the couch with red, puffy eyes like she'd been crying all morning. She jumped up the second she saw me and started talking fast about how she never meant to hurt me and everyone was overreacting to the whole situation. I stayed calm and told her we needed to figure out living arrangements because I couldn't stay there with her anymore. She nodded at first like she understood, then her expression changed completely. She said I humiliated her on that live stream and ruined her reputation in front of all our friends. I pointed out that I simply told the truth about how her behavior made me feel, and she was the one who chose to broadcast it to an audience in the first place. That set her off, and she started raising her voice about how I made her look like a terrible person when she was just joking around. I walked past her toward the bedroom to pack some clothes, and she followed right behind me, still talking. She kept saying it was all jokes, and I was being way too dramatic about a few harmless teases. I pulled my duffel bag from the closet and started grabbing shirts from the dresser, while she stood in the doorway listing all the reasons her behavior wasn't that bad. Every excuse she made just confirmed that breaking up was absolutely the right decision. She brought up how her friends thought the photoshopped picture was funny and how the fake marriage certificate was supposed to be cute. I stuffed jeans and socks into the bag without responding because there was nothing left to say to someone who still didn't get it. She asked where I was planning to go, and I told her I'd stay with Jong until we sorted out the lease situation. She needed to stop contacting me directly from now on. Molly agreed, but then made a comment about me running to my anime boyfriend, and I realized she still didn't understand why her behavior was wrong, even after everything that happened. I zipped up the bag and walked past her out of the apartment without another word. Back at Jong's place, I dropped my stuff in the spare room and immediately called the apartment manager to explain the situation. She answered on the 3rd ring, and I told her about the breakup and asked what options existed for breaking the lease early. She sounded sympathetic and said this happened with college couples more often than I'd think, so she knew how to handle it. The manager explained that if one of us found someone to take over their half of the lease, the other person could stay or also leave. Since Molly and I were both on the lease equally, it was just a matter of who moved first and found a replacement. I thanked her and said I'd figure out my next steps soon. I spent the evening on my laptop looking at other housing options near campus and quickly realized most places were already full for the semester. Moving might mean a much longer commute to classes or paying way more rent than I could afford on my part-time job income. The stress of apartment hunting on top of everything else made my head hurt. Jong came into the room around 9 and asked how the search was going. I admitted it wasn't looking good, and he sat down on the edge of the bed. He suggested I could crash with him through the end of the semester if needed, since his roommate just moved out last month and he was looking for someone anyway. The relief I felt hearing that was huge, because it meant I had a real backup plan that didn't involve staying with Molly or scrambling to find some overpriced place across town. The next day at my campus job at the library, I was restocking books in the history section when my coworker came over and asked if I was the guy from that viral breakup video. My stomach flipped because I hadn't thought about the live stream being recorded. She explained that someone screen-recorded parts of it before Molly deleted everything, and now it was shared around on different platforms. I asked her where she saw it, and she pulled out her phone to show me a post with over 15,000 views. My hands felt cold as I stared at the screen, watching myself on camera, telling Molly we were done. The quality was grainy, but you could see everything clearly enough. My face looked different from I remembered, more tired and frustrated. The comments under the post were mostly supportive, though, with people saying they respected me for standing up or that Molly crossed a line. My coworker pointed to a few specific comments and told me that everyone she shared it with took my side completely. She said watching me defend myself actually inspired some people who dealt with similar stuff in their own relationships. That made me feel slightly better about the whole thing being out there for strangers to see. I thanked her and went back to shelving books, trying not to think about how many people had watched the worst moment of my relationship. About an hour into my shift, A guy approached the desk holding a stack of graphic novels. He set them down and asked if I was the person from the video everyone was sharing. I nodded slowly, waiting for him to make fun of me or ask invasive questions. Instead, he smiled and said he watched the show too and thought the recent episode with the demon battle in Gangnam was incredible. We ended up talking for almost 10 minutes about the animation quality and how the fight scenes were choreographed better than most live-action shows. He mentioned his favorite character was Hana because of her sword techniques, and I agreed that her fighting style was the most unique. Before he left, he told me not to let anyone make me feel bad about liking good storytelling. 2 more people came up during my shift and brought up the show without any mockery or jokes. One girl told me the latest episode made her cry, and we talked about how the writers balanced action with emotional moments. Another person said they started watching because of all the buzz online and got hooked immediately. Nobody laughed or called it a cartoon for kids. Nobody made me feel weird for enjoying something. It was just normal conversation about a show we all liked. Walking back to the break room after my shift ended, something clicked in my head about the whole situation with Molly. She made me feel ashamed of watching something that tons of people actually enjoyed and thought was good. I spent weeks hiding my interest and trying to justify it to someone who never respected me in the first place. Instead of finding people who shared the same interests, I wasted energy defending myself to someone determined to mock me, no matter what I said. The show was popular and well-made, and lots of people my age watched it. There was nothing wrong with me for liking it. The problem was Molly treating my interests like character flaws. I grabbed my stuff from my locker and headed out to the parking lot. My phone buzzed with a text from Hunter, asking if I wanted to grab coffee and talk more about what she mentioned before. I texted back yes and asked when she was free. She replied immediately saying she could meet in an hour at the coffee shop near campus. I agreed and drove over early to grab a table. The place was pretty empty for a weeknight, just a few students studying in the corner booths. Hunter showed up exactly on time carrying a big canvas bag covered in pins. She ordered some complicated drink with extra shots and sat down across from me. She started by saying she felt terrible about not defending me earlier when Molly was being mean. I told her I appreciated her reaching out now. Hunter explained that she and 2 other friends actually talked privately about how cruel Molly was getting over the past few weeks. They noticed it going from light teasing to genuine meanness, but convinced themselves it wasn't their place to get involved in our relationship. She said they worried about making things worse or causing drama in the friend group. I understood that logic, but it still hurt knowing people saw what was happening and stayed quiet. Hunter apologized again and admitted she felt guilty for laughing along sometimes, even when she knew the jokes were wrong. She said she got caught up in the moment and went along with the group instead of speaking up. I told her I wasn't angry at friends who stayed quiet, just disappointed that nobody felt able to say something. She nodded and took a sip of her coffee. Then she mentioned that Molly had been texting people in our friend group over the past few days, asking them to take her side. Apparently, Molly wanted people to tell me I overreacted and made too big a deal out of some harmless jokes. Hunter said most people were ignoring the messages or giving short responses that didn't commit to anything. She showed me a few of the texts on her phone where Molly wrote long paragraphs about how I embarrassed her on camera and ruined her reputation. Nobody was really buying it, though, because they all saw what happened and thought Molly went too far. Hunter put her phone away and got quiet for a second. She picked at her napkin and seemed nervous about something. Then she asked if I ever heard about what happened between Molly and someone named Timmy. My heart started beating faster because that was the exact name my friends mentioned right before I left, that night after the live stream. I told Hunter I didn't know who Timmy was and asked her to explain. She leaned back in her chair and said, "Timmy dated Molly about 1.5 years ago, before I transferred to this school. Their breakup was apparently really messy and involved Molly publicly mocking something personal about him, though Hunter didn't know all the specific details. She just remembered hearing about drama and Timmy being really upset for a while after. I asked why nobody mentioned this when Molly and I started dating 6 months ago. Hunter looked uncomfortable and admitted she didn't make the connection at first, because Molly seemed different with me in the beginning. The mockery started small with little comments and jokes, then slowly got worse over time. Hunter said it was the same pattern that apparently happened with Timmy, based on what she heard from people who knew him. She wished someone had warned her back then so she could have warned me, but by the time she realized the similarities, things were already bad between us. Hunter stared down at her coffee cup and started peeling the wrapper off her straw. She looked like she wanted to say something else but couldn't figure out how to start. I waited, watching her fidget with the paper until she finally looked up at me. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts. "Look, I know someone who could tell you more about what happened with Timmy," she said. "His girlfriend, Natalia. She knows the whole story because Timmy told her everything when they started dating." My stomach tightened at the thought of digging deeper into Molly's past, Part of me wanted to just move on and forget about her completely, but another part needed to understand if this was really a pattern or just bad luck that Molly dated two guys who couldn't handle her jokes. Hunter must have seen the conflict on my face because she quickly added that I didn't have to meet Natalia if I didn't want to, but she thought it might help me process everything to talk to someone who understood. I picked at the edge of my napkin and thought about it for a minute. What would knowing more about Timmy's experience actually do for me? Molly and I were already broken up. The relationship was over, but something in me needed to know if she did this on purpose or if it was just how she acted in relationships without realizing it. Okay, I said. I'll meet her. Hunter's face showed relief as she started typing out a text message. Her thumbs moved fast across her screen, and within seconds her phone buzzed with a response. She showed me the message where Natalia said she'd be happy to meet tomorrow at this same coffee shop. Just like that, it was set up. Hunter put her phone away, and we talked about other stuff for a while, but my mind kept drifting to what I might learn tomorrow. We finished our drinks and said goodbye outside the coffee shop. I walked back to Jung's apartment as the sun started setting, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. The evening felt heavy somehow, like the air before a storm. Back at the apartment, Jung was making dinner and asked how the coffee with Hunter went. I told him about Natalia and the plan to meet tomorrow. He stopped stirring the pasta and turned to look at me. "You sure you want to go down this road?" he asked. I wasn't sure at all, but I nodded anyway. That night, I lay in the guest bed at Jung's place and stared at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come no matter how many times I rolled over or adjusted my pillow. My brain kept running through possible scenarios of what Natalia might tell me tomorrow. Did Molly do the exact same things to Timmy that she did to me? Was there some trigger that made her start mocking people? Or was it just her personality to find what someone cared about and use it against them? I grabbed my phone and checked the time. 2 a.m. I'd been lying here for hours just thinking in circles. I pulled up YouTube and started watching random videos to distract myself, but nothing held my attention. Every few minutes, my thoughts drifted back to tomorrow's meeting. What if hearing about Timmy's experience made everything worse? What if it didn't give me any answers at all? I finally fell asleep sometime after 4, my phone still playing videos on my chest. The next morning, I woke up groggy and anxious. Jung had already left for his early class, leaving a note on the counter that said good luck. I showered and got dressed, taking longer than usual because I kept zoning out and forgetting what I was doing. The coffee shop wasn't far from Jung's place, so I walked there slowly, trying to calm my nerves. I arrived 15 minutes early and ordered a black coffee, then sat at a table near the window where I could watch people walking by. My leg bounced under the table as I checked my phone every 30 seconds. Right at 11, a woman with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail walked through the door. She scanned the coffee shop and made eye contact with me, then smiled and headed to the counter. I watched her order some complicated drink with extra shots and caramel drizzle, joking with the barista about needing all the caffeine she could get. When her drink was ready, she walked over to my table. "You must be the guy Hunter told me about," she said, setting down her coffee. I stood up and shook her hand. She had a warm, friendly energy that immediately put me at ease. "I'm Natalia. Hunter should be here in a minute. She's just parking." We made small talk about the weather in the coffee shop until Hunter arrived a few minutes later. She greeted both of us and sat down, but after a few minutes of chatting, she checked her phone and said she had to run to class. "I'll leave you two to talk," she said, giving me an encouraging look before heading out. Natalia took a long sip of her coffee and then set it down carefully. "So, Hunter told me a bit about what happened with you and Molly," she started. "I'm guessing you want to know about Timmy's experience with her." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. Natalia's expression shifted to something more serious. "Timmy doesn't really like talking about what happened," she said. "It messed him up for a while. But I know the whole story because he told me everything when we first started dating. He wanted me to understand why he was so cautious about relationships." She paused and looked at me directly. "I'm telling you this because I wish someone had warned Timmy before he got involved with Molly. Maybe it would have saved him a lot of pain." My heart started beating faster. Natalia wrapped both hands around her coffee cup and continued. "Timmy is really into photography, like seriously passionate about it. About 2 years ago, he was working on this personal project about masculinity and vulnerability. He was taking these portraits of guys in emotional moments, trying to capture something real and raw." She took another sip of her drink. "Molly thought the whole thing was pretentious. She started making fun of it to their friends, calling Timmy a wannabe artist. She'd mock his feelings photos and say he was trying too hard to be deep. The words hit me like ice water. It was already sounding familiar." Natalia kept going. "At first, Timmy tried to laugh it off, but Molly kept pushing. She'd bring it up at parties, show people his photos, and make sarcastic comments about them. Then one day she posted some of his photos on her Instagram with these captions that made his serious work look like a joke." I felt my hands tighten around my coffee cup. Natalia noticed and nodded. "Yeah, Timmy confronted her about it and she told him he was being too sensitive. said he couldn't handle criticism of his art and needed to toughen up. But it wasn't criticism, it was mockery. There's a difference. My throat felt tight. This was exactly what happened to me, just with photography instead of anime. How did it end? I asked. Natalia's face darkened. Timmy finally broke up with her after she brought his photos to a party specifically to show people and laugh at them. He walked in and found her gathered with a group, passing around prints of his most personal work, while everyone made jokes. He was completely humiliated. She stirred her coffee slowly. It took him months to feel comfortable sharing his photography again. He almost gave it up completely because Molly made him feel so stupid for caring about it. I sat back in my chair, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. The pattern was identical. Find something the person cares about deeply, turn it into a joke, escalate the mockery publicly, then claim they're too sensitive when they object. It wasn't about anime or photography. It was about finding the thing that mattered most and using it as a weapon. Did Molly ever apologize? I asked. Did she ever admit what she did was wrong? Natalia shook her head firmly. Never. After they broke up, she told everyone that Timmy couldn't handle dating someone with a sense of humor. She completely rewrote what happened, made herself the victim of his oversensitivity. My hands were shaking now. That was exactly what Molly tried to do on the live stream before people called her out. Natalia leaned forward. Here's the thing that really bothers me. A few of Molly's friends from back then actually tried to tell her the mockery was mean. They pulled her aside and said she was going too far. And you know what she did? She dismissed them exactly the same way she dismissed you on that live stream Hunter told me about. Told them they were being dramatic and couldn't take a joke. I stared at my coffee, watching the dark liquid swirl as my hand trembled slightly. This wasn't about me being too sensitive or my interests being embarrassing. This was just how Molly operated in relationships. She found what you loved, what made you vulnerable, and she turned it into ammunition. Then she made you feel crazy for being hurt by it. I thanked Natalia for telling me everything about Timmy and what happened with Molly. My voice came out quieter than I expected when I asked if Timmy would be willing to talk to me directly about his experience. Natalia pulled out her phone and started typing a message while explaining she would ask him, but wanted to warn me that he might not want to go back to that time in his life. I told her I completely understood and wouldn't push if he wasn't comfortable. She sent the text, and we finished our coffees while talking about other things, lighter topics that didn't involve Molly or relationship trauma. When we said goodbye outside the coffee shop, Natalia gave me a quick hug and told me to hang in there. I started walking back toward Jong's apartment, taking the long route through campus because I needed time to think. The afternoon sun felt warm on my face as I passed groups of students sitting on the grass and couples walking hand in hand. My mind kept replaying everything Natalia had told me about Timmy's photography and how Molly turned something he cared about into a weapon against him. The pattern was so clear now that I couldn't believe I hadn't seen it before. This wasn't about my interests being embarrassing or childish. This wasn't about me being too sensitive or unable to take a joke. Molly had a system, a way of operating in relationships that involved finding what her partner loved most and slowly destroying their confidence in it. She picked the thing that made them vulnerable and used it to hurt them over and over while claiming it was all in good fun. I walked past the library where I worked and remembered all the times I'd hidden what I was watching on my laptop during breaks because I was afraid someone would see and judge me the way Molly did. She had gotten so deep into my head that I started policing my own interests before she even had a chance to mock them. By the time I reached Jong's building, I felt exhausted from processing everything, but also strangely lighter. Understanding that this was Molly's pattern and not my failure made the weight of the past few months feel less personal. I pulled out my phone as I climbed the stairs to Jong's apartment and opened my messages. I typed out a text to Hunter thanking her for connecting me with Natalia and explaining how helpful it was to hear Timmy's story. Her response came back within minutes, saying she felt terrible for not recognizing the pattern sooner and wished she had said something weeks ago. I wrote back telling her it wasn't her fault and that I hadn't seen it either until I was completely out of the situation. She sent back a heart emoji and said she was glad I was doing okay. Inside the apartment, I dropped onto Jong's couch and stared at my phone for a while, scrolling through old messages and trying to pinpoint exactly when things had started going wrong with Molly. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Rhett, my actual roommate who I'd barely seen since the breakup happened. He said he'd been staying with his girlfriend to give me and Molly space to sort things out. His message asked if it was safe to come back now, or if the situation was still too intense and volatile. I felt guilty that Rhett had been displaced from his own apartment because of my relationship drama. I called him instead of texting back and filled him in on everything that had happened, including my plan to move in with Jong starting next month. Rhett sounded relieved when he admitted that living with me and Molly's relationship problems had been really uncomfortable for weeks. He said he'd heard her making fun of me multiple times when I wasn't around and never knew how to address it without making things weird. I told him I understood and didn't blame him for not getting involved in something that wasn't his business. He asked when I was planning to pack up my stuff and move out completely. I explained that I needed to go back and get my things, but wanted to avoid another confrontation with Molly if possible. Rhett immediately offered to be there when I went to pack in case Molly tried to start another argument or make the process difficult. I appreciated the support more than I could express, and we made plans to go the following weekend when Molly had mentioned she'd be visiting her parents. Over the next few days, I threw myself into my regular routine of classes and work shifts at the library. It felt strange at first, having all this free time that I used to spend with Molly or worrying about her reactions to everything I did. But it was also surprisingly easy to fill those hours with things I actually enjoyed. I caught up on reading for my classes, picked up extra shifts at work, and even started rewatching some of my favorite anime series without feeling like I needed to hide it or justify my interest to anyone. My coworker at the library noticed I seemed more relaxed and asked if everything was okay. I gave her the short version about the breakup, and she nodded knowingly, saying sometimes the end of a relationship is actually the beginning of feeling like yourself again. On Thursday afternoon, Corbin sent me a text inviting me to a watch party at his place for the new episode of K-pop Demon Hunters that was dropping on Friday night. He said some of his friends who were also into anime would be there, and it would be a chill group just hanging out and enjoying the show together. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling nervous about meeting new people after everything that had happened. Part of me wanted to stay home and watch the episode alone like I'd been doing for weeks. But another part of me knew that hiding wasn't going to help me move forward. I texted back saying I'd be there and asked if I should bring anything. Corbin replied, telling me just to bring myself and maybe some snacks if I wanted to contribute. Friday evening arrived and I showed up at Corbin's apartment carrying a bag of chips and feeling anxious about how the night would go. But the moment I walked in and saw the group of people gathered around the TV, all genuinely excited about the show, something in my chest relaxed. Nobody made jokes about the animation being for kids or mocked the premise of Demon Hunters in Seoul. Instead, they discussed the previous episode's fight choreography and debated theories about upcoming plot twists. When the new episode started, everyone fell silent and watched with complete attention. During the commercial breaks, people shared their favorite moments and pointed out details in the animation that I'd missed. One person brought up how the show handled themes of identity and belonging in really thoughtful ways. Another talked about the incredible soundtrack and how the opening theme had been stuck in their head all week. For the first time in months, I enjoyed something I loved without feeling defensive or ashamed about it. After the episode ended, the group kept talking and laughing while we finished off the snacks. Someone I hadn't met before mentioned they'd seen a clip of my live stream breakup going around online. My stomach dropped for a second, worried about what they were going to say, but they smiled and told me that watching me defend the show and stand up for myself actually convinced them to check out K-pop Demon Hunters for the first time. They said they'd been hearing about it, but thought it might not be for them until they saw how passionate I was about it. We all ended up laughing about the absurdity of my relationship ending on camera, somehow becoming free promotion for an anime series. Corbin joked that the show's marketing team should send me a thank you card. Someone else said I should get a percentage of new viewer subscriptions that came from people who saw the clip. The conversation stayed light and fun, and by the time I left Corbin's place that night, I had exchanged numbers with several people and made plans to come back for the next watch party. I felt good leaving that night, like I'd found people who got it. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Natalia saying Timmy wanted to meet if I was still interested. I typed back yes without thinking twice. Part of me needed to hear from someone who'd been through the same thing with Molly. We set up coffee for Tuesday afternoon at that same place where I'd met Natalia. When Tuesday came around, I showed up early and grabbed a corner table. Timmy walked in right at 2, and I recognized him from Natalia's Instagram. He had this careful look in his eyes, like he was sizing me up while also being ready to bolt. We shook hands, and he sat down across from me. For a minute, we just made small talk about the weather and classes, both of us dancing around why we were really there. Then he asked how I was holding up after everything, and I admitted it had been rough but getting better. He nodded like he understood exactly what I meant. I asked him what happened with Molly, and he took a long breath before starting. The story came out slowly at first, then faster as he got into it. Timmy told me he was really into photography, that he'd been working on this personal project about guys being vulnerable and showing emotion. Molly thought it was pretentious from the start. She'd make comments about him being a wannabe artist, asking if he was going to open a gallery for his feelings photos. At first, he thought she was just teasing, that she'd come around once she saw the finished work, but she never did. The mockery got worse instead of better. Molly started showing his photos to their friends and making fun of them, pointing out every flaw and laughing at the ones where he'd tried to capture something emotional. When he told her it hurt his feelings, she said he was proving her point about being too sensitive. The breaking point came at a party where Molly pulled up his photos on her phone and passed it around specifically so people could laugh at them. Timmy said he felt his stomach drop when he saw what she was doing. He left the party, broke up with her the next day, and it took him months before he felt okay sharing his photography again. Listening to him talk felt weird because it was like hearing my own story with different details. The pattern was identical. Find something the person cares about, mock it publicly, escalate the humiliation, then claim they're too sensitive when they object. I asked if he ever confronted Molly after they broke up or tried to warn other people. Timmy shook his head and said he tried once, but she twisted it around and told people he was bitter and couldn't let go. After that, he decided it wasn't worth the energy. He focused on healing himself and eventually met Natalia, who actually supported his photography and understood why it mattered to him. That was more important than getting Molly to admit what she did. Hearing him say that made something click in my head. I'd been waiting for Molly to apologize or at least acknowledge she'd hurt me, but that wasn't going to happen. Understanding the pattern was enough. I could move forward without needing her validation or waiting for her to change. Timmy and I talked for another hour about other stuff, just normal conversation about school and life. When we left, he told me to reach out if I ever needed to talk to someone who got it. I thanked him and headed back to Jong's place feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The weekend finally arrived, and Rhett texted saying he was ready to help me pack. We drove over to the apartment Saturday morning. Molly had left for her parents' place like she promised, which made everything easier. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, hit by how weird it felt to be back in a place that used to be mine, but now felt foreign. Rhett followed me in, and we got to work. I started in the bedroom, pulling clothes from the closet and stuffing them into boxes. Rhett grabbed my books from the living room shelves and wrapped them in newspaper. We worked mostly in silence, just the sound of packing tape and cardboard. While I was clearing off the desk, I found the fake marriage certificate Molly had printed. It was sitting right there on her desk, like some kind of trophy. I picked it up and stared at it, remembering how humiliated I felt when she posted it online. For a second, I thought about leaving it there or confronting her about it. Instead, I pulled out my phone and took a picture for documentation, then crumpled it up and threw it in the trash. It felt good to toss it away. We finished packing faster than I expected since I didn't have much furniture. Most of the big stuff belonged to Molly, or came with the apartment. By early afternoon, we were loading the last boxes into Rhett's truck. I took one final look around the apartment, making sure I hadn't forgotten anything important. Then I locked the door and dropped my key in the mailbox for the landlord. The drive to Jong's place took 20 minutes. Jong met us outside and helped carry boxes up the stairs. My new room was smaller than my old one, but it felt better somehow, like a fresh start. We set up my bed frame and dresser, hung my clothes in the closet. Jong joked about how I could finally put up my anime posters without anyone making fun of me. I laughed and told him I might actually do that. By the time Rhett left and Jong went to grab dinner, I was sitting in my new room surrounded by unpacked boxes, but feeling okay about it. I pulled out my phone and texted Molly that I'd moved out and Jong would be covering my half of the lease starting next month. She responded with just the word fine and nothing else. No argument, no drama, just acceptance. It was the most satisfying text I'd ever gotten from her. The next few weeks fell into a pattern that felt good, in a way I hadn't expected. I went to my morning classes, grabbed lunch at the campus food court, then headed to my shift at the library. After work, I'd either meet up with Corbin and the anime group for a watch party, or grab coffee with Timmy and Natalia at the place near campus. Jong and I settled into being roommates easily since we'd been friends for years anyway. He never made me feel weird about the breakup, or asked too many questions about what happened. We just existed in the same space and it worked. The watch parties became my favorite part of the week. Every Thursday night, I'd head over to Corbin's apartment where a group of us would gather to watch the latest episode of K-pop Demon Hunters. People brought snacks and drinks, and we'd all sit around his TV actually discussing the animation quality and plot developments without anyone mocking it. Sometimes we'd rewind scenes to catch details we missed, or debate theories about where the story was going. It felt amazing to enjoy something without constantly defending why I liked it. Timmy and I met up every Tuesday afternoon between our classes. We'd talk about regular stuff like homework and work schedules, but sometimes the conversation would drift to our experiences with Molly. He'd share little things he remembered, and I'd realize how similar our stories were. Having someone who understood what it felt like to be targeted that way helped more than I expected it would. Natalia usually joined us, and she was cool about the whole thing, never making it awkward that her boyfriend and I bonded over dating the same person. One afternoon, while we were sitting outside the student center, Hunter walked up and joined us. She'd been checking in regularly since everything happened, and I appreciated that she actually followed through instead of just apologizing once and disappearing. Hunter pulled out her phone and scrolled for a second before looking up at us. She mentioned that Molly had reactivated her Instagram account about a week ago. I felt my stomach tighten a little, but I asked what she was posting. Hunter said it was all carefully chosen photos and captions, like travel pictures and food posts, with no mention of the breakup or what happened on the live stream. Some of our mutual friends still followed her, but Hunter noticed people were more careful around Molly now, not engaging as much with her posts or making plans with her like they used to. The dynamic had shifted and people were cautious. I nodded and told Hunter I appreciated the update, but I wasn't going to look at Molly's account myself. I'd blocked her, and I wanted to keep it that way. Hunter understood and changed the subject to asking if I was coming to the season finale watch party at Corbin's place that weekend. 3 months after the breakup, I found myself sitting in Corbin's living room with about 15 other people, all of us packed in to watch the K-pop Demon Hunters season finale. Someone had ordered pizza, and there were drinks everywhere, and the energy in the room felt exciting. When the episode started, everyone went quiet, except for occasional gasps or comments during the big fight scenes. The finale delivered everything we'd been waiting for, and when it ended, the room erupted in discussion about what just happened. Corbin looked over at me and grinned, then announced to the group that my origin story was the breakup that brought me to them. Everyone laughed, but it was warm and friendly, not cruel. A few people raised their drinks, and someone joked that Molly accidentally did me a favor. I laughed along with them and realized something sitting there surrounded by these people. I was genuinely happy. These were people who accepted what I liked and respected my boundaries. They didn't make me feel ashamed or weird for enjoying things. The relationship ending had been painful, but it was also the best thing that could have happened because it led me here. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out to see a text from someone I'd met at the last watch party. They were asking if I wanted to grab dinner sometime, maybe try that new Korean place downtown. I smiled as I typed back yes, feeling ready to try again with someone who actually appreciated who I am.